So welcome everybody to the NMSA standard launch. We're so pleased to have so many with you here join us today, this afternoon. We have a few number of speakers for you today. Just to let you know that this meeting is recorded and a version will be available on the InstMC website. We ask you to feel free to ask some questions in the chat or the Q&A along the top. We'll pick those up in the end, questions and themes in the discussion panel. So I shall now pass you over to our keynote speaker, Dr. Mike Percival from Rolls-Royce, on the importance of the industry approach to skills.
Caroline, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much to Phil for the invitation to speak here. For those who I've not met before, my name is Mike Percival, and I'm Global Head of Manufacturing Engineering at Rolls-Royce. I'll explain a little bit of what that means as I kind of just give a little bit more introduction. But I thought it would be worth kind of starting off just with, as I say, with a bit of personal introduction with my own career. So if you can kind of just click on for me, Caroline. I'm probably quite unusual in this community in that actually my degree and background is in geology and a PhD in mineral sciences. And you're kind of thinking, well, how do you land up working in manufacturing engineering in Rolls-Royce? The answer is actually quite varied. So I came into Rolls-Royce in materials research and development. I was actually originally working on ceramic composites. So the boundary between minerals and materials, you could argue, is quite small, because I was working on natural minerals and then artificial minerals, or ceramics as they were called at the time. But after a few years there, I moved into design engineering. I was working in the very hottest part of the gas turbine engine, just behind the combustion chamber, in the nozzle guide vane design team, working with structures that run well above with the gas temperature well above the melting temperature of the metal. And then somebody sort of said to me, would I like to get involved in the manufacturing of those same components? And that kind of led me into manufacturing engineering, and frankly a passion which I've now pursued for 24 years since then, in how do you make some of the extraordinary things that we make in Rolls-Royce. So if you can click on for me, Caroline, probably 2 clicks maybe. So my current role as Global Head of Manufacturing Engineering is all about controlling the way that that manufacturing engineering is done in all of our factories. That's responsible across the company for processes, standards, tools, methods, skills, competence, everything that we do in order to do manufacturing engineering properly. And as I've kind of put there in bold and italics, a key focus on product safety. So doing manufacturing engineering properly is really important to the way that we, the safety of our products. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But if I kind of think about observations from sort of all of my experience over those years, the first is that diversity comes in many forms. So I kind of deliberately started by talking about my degree and my background in PhD, because I think it's quite important that we don't sort of think that diversity is just about gender, just about discipline that we work in, but it's actually about the whole person and the whole different skill set that we bring together. But if you can click on for me, diversity is great, but actually there are also really important transferable skills you can take from one place to another. So I kind of learned about studying minerals and brought that into materials. I learned about leading people and took that from materials into design, into manufacturing. In manufacturing, I kind of, on some occasions, have looked back into minerals and thought, well, actually, casting is just geology done really quickly, because what you're doing, you're taking a molten mixture of stuff that cools down and crystallizing. So there's lots of transferable skills that you can move from one place to another. But if you can click on again for me, then those transferable skills only have relevance if you can demonstrate credibility in the role that you've got. You can't be leading, you can't be moving things forward if you can't demonstrate a level of credibility from the technical skills in the role. If you can click on again, particularly in our world of a safety assured environment, technical credibility, technical depth is key. But to judge whether you've got that or not, you need clear standards and clear standards to judge that. So I think I kind of take from my own learning that to be credible in manufacturing engineering, I've needed to be able to demonstrate that I've got skills to a level, to a standard that other people in manufacturing engineering will pay attention to. So if you could click on for me again, I kind of want to explore a little bit more around what that means in an assured environment, somewhere where safety is critical. So if you can click for me again. Simple question. Would you trust a surgeon who wasn't accredited by the GMC? Probably not. Would you go to a lawyer who wasn't accredited by the Law Society? Quite a doubtful thing to do. Would you fly on a plane if you didn't believe it had been built correctly? Okay. I'm glad Phil chose that picture to put on the slide rather than one of a plane that hadn't been built correctly. Right now, I can definitely provide real personal evidence that my wife has said to me, "We're not going on a 737 MAX, are we, darling?" and realistically, that's a really valid question. But our surgeon has a really clear set of standards that the GMC test them to. Rules about how do they move forward from one place to another, how do they maintain their skills, what do they need to do. The lawyer has to keep up with the case records and prove their continuing professional development back to the Law Society to maintain that reputation. Is it right, is it appropriate that in aerospace, in the industry that much of Rolls-Royce operates in, not the only industry, but much of Rolls-Royce, is it right that we make our own rules? We decide what the accreditation is that says that somebody's appropriate to build a plane, build an engine, make a part of an engine, say that it's correct. So that need for clear standards so that we can all work together is very consistent with our world as the worlds of the lawyers and the surgeons, and you can come up with other examples. So if you could click on again for me. This is literally lifted from the Rolls-Royce product safety policy. And it's the sort of introduction paragraph, which says for us 5 principles govern our approach to product safety. And you can kind of see those principles listed there. But if you can click again for me, the one that I really want to focus on in this space, is conforming product, which somehow that green box has wandered off from where
I think it's the translation of the slides is definitely
sorry about that. But anyway, conforming product. So one of the 5 principles that we have in our product safety policy for all of those key products, and this is common whether it be aero engines or nuclear reactors or power systems or propulsion systems for marine vessels that we make. Conforming product is key. But how do we know it's conforming? And clearly, if I think back to that question of sort of how do we accredit people that aerospace product is made properly? How do we prove that something is conforming? How do we know it's conforming? Is a key link into this community of metrology and measurement. So if you could click on again for me. It's not just about safety. I've kind of played a big part about safety, but actually having clear standards, clear methods, clear approach to how do we do something in our industry, and particularly around metrology and measurement, isn't just about safety. It's really, really, really important, and it's kind of what what makes me take my role really seriously. But as the other sections of that disc show, process control, having good processes that produce the right product at the right speed, at the right cost, good metrology, good measurement to a good standard is key in there. And then talent development, the people in our industry doing ability of the people within the company. And so that talent development element is really important to me personally as well. So if you click on again for me, I think I just wanted to reflect on the fact that and thinking of that talent development, of the skills gaps and the skills shortages that we all see. And we've just kind of picked out a random selection of recent reports from reviews and the media and so on around the skills gap in engineering in general and so on. But when we look in detail within Rolls-Royce at where we are, and let's be clear, we have a really good advantage when it comes to recruiting people. It's a big blue badge and it says Rolls-Royce on it. And in most places, that's a pretty good start to recruiting talent. But even we find it really hard to find skilled people that we need in some of those critical engineering roles, and metrology is key amongst them. And equally, we know that growing people slowly through the organization is great, but it lands you up with a population of incredibly skilled, incredibly capable, but rather frighteningly close to retirement people. And we need to fill that pipeline and get that running. If we struggle in Rolls-Royce, then I absolutely know that others will struggle more. And we absolutely want to support the industry as a whole to make sure that journey, that talent development, that skills gap is being filled. So final slide, I think, if you can click on again for me. So why do I think that an industry approach is key? I mean, the first is collaboration. As I've kind of said there, we know we've got some big advantages. We know we've got size. We know we've got criticality. We know we've got the advantage of the Rolls-Royce badge. But we need to be in the middle of helping everybody to collaborate to fix this shared need and this shared problem. If you could click on again. Having common standards is utterly critical. We've seen that in other places, and I go back to my surgeons and my lawyers. Having something that everybody recognizes then becomes a way that we can grow people, the way that we can make sure that we're doing things to the right level and the right standard in the right place, and know the outcome that you're going to get from that. And then finally, if you click on again for me, then all of that brings us agility. And as we move forward, one of the things that we know is that people are going to spend, and we're already seeing this, spend less time growing a single coherent long career in one employer doing one thing. That's not the way that people think these days. So we need to be able to respond to the need to flex, to move people around, to respond to different things. So having that commonality and that collaboration leads to agility, which will make us all stronger together. So hopefully that kind of gives a flavour of why I'm really pleased to have been invited, really pleased to sort of sponsor this activity and to get involved, and why Rolls-Royce felt it was very important to be in the middle of it. So thank you very much indeed. And I'll be back as part of the panel at the end. So if you've got any questions or things that you want to raise from what I've said, drop them in the Q&A, as Caroline said, and in the panel at the end, we'll pick those up. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So, Caroline, do you want to move us to the next section? I'm Phil Bamforth, so I look after kind of measurement in Rolls-Royce. and I've been involved in the NMSA since it was formed. And I'll just, Steph, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, yeah, so Steph Smith, I'm the Chief Executive of the Institute of Measurement and Control, where the National Metrology Skills Alliance has found its home as our special interest group.
Super, thanks, Steph. So what me and Steph will do now is just take you through a little bit of kind of background really on what NMSA is, where it came from, and then where it's going. And then a little bit later on, Alan Oliphant from AWE is going to just talk about how they're using the standards. And then David Torr at Reliance Precision is going to just walk us through kind of what is available now and what kind of detail you can download today on NMSA. So in Chris Whitty style, next slide, please. This slide, we put this together right at the very start of the NMSA to kind of describe a bit of a problem. And essentially every organisation typically has role descriptions. You have internal and external training courses that you might use for your people. You have skills and competency definitions that maybe go with those, and often a career development process to kind of develop your people through their job roles. And if you click on a few sort of clicks to the end of this slide for me, Caroline, each organisation's got that. Yeah, that's it. They've typically got that. The supply chain of that organisation has got their own version of that. So for me, in my organisation, we've got role descriptions and we've got training and skills definitions. All of our suppliers have as well. If you go into academia, they'll have a flavour of that. And if you look right across wider industry and science, you've got numerous different things of this. And if you click on one more for me, Caroline, the kind of really key thing here is a lot of the metrology activity is actually pretty common. And therefore, there's not really much value for Rolls-Royce PLC, for UK PLC, for everybody doing this themselves and all that waste. So can't we just do this together? And if you just click on one more, other areas, so non-destructive testing, they've had international standards for this for many years, and people generally know what an NDT level 3 person should be doing. And if you go and search on Google, everybody's excited about how much they earn. That's the #1 hit. But then you can start to see other things there about courses and exams and certification. And metrology shouldn't be any different to that. So if you click on again for me, Caroline, these are the kind of objectives we wrote for ourselves at the start of this. And it was really around, can we get that standardized framework for skills for metrology defined across different levels of skill that draw in things like competency requirements. It helps define career paths. It gives us a route to an international standard. So, for example, NDT have got ISO 9712 and a number of other standards that define that, so everybody knows what this is all about. And then against those skills definitions, some sort of accreditation or assurance process for people to demonstrate that they're at that level of skill. So that's what we've kind of set out to do. So if we click on another one for me, Caroline. Probably easiest just to click through this slide so it builds. So what we sort of started back in 2021, we got working and talking with the Midlands Centre for Data-Driven Metrology. So the MCDDM was formed through Loughborough University, Nottingham, and Coventry universities getting together and working on this. And myself and Steph, and then Trevor Turman from Coventry University at the time. Trevor's retired since then. But we got together and we shared what our thoughts were on this. And I guess, Steph, do you want to just sort of share your kind of back then what you were kind of feeding in as a challenge in this area and where we sort of started?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we did in the early meetings that shocked us all was do a find word in UK spec from Engineering Council. I mean, for the word metrology, not in there. Metrologist, not in there. Measurement, barely in there, but only in reference to measuring your competencies rather than performing any level of scientific measurement. So we said that there's an issue here, there's a gap. Not dissing UK spec at all or chartered engineer. It's very robust set of competencies, and it's very important, but there wasn't that level of specialism there for people working in metrology. And I think that was something we all came together and agreed that was very much missing.
Yeah, absolutely, and I guess that's been a theme all the way through this as we've started to form the group. So we started in 2021, and we had conversations with lots of different people, and kind of got this consistent feedback, as Steph's described there, of there's a gap. So we started to form a group back in 2021. There's a number of the people who've been involved on the call today, and we'll show you those in more detail in a minute. 2021 was really where 2022 was where we started kind of getting the group together physically, writing documents. We had a number of face-to-face meetings at lots of different sites for the people who are members of the NMSA, and lots of virtual calls, and there was a lot of hard work done through that period. And it got us to the back end of 2022 where we did a bit of an alpha test. So we sort of took the standard away into our different companies and tried to see where the opportunities were for improving and testing it. And that then led into some changes, and then we beta tested it last year. And that allowed us to kind of get a standard that at the end of last year we were able to finish, and we've shared that with the members of the NMSA, and then today is all about obviously sharing that with the wider world. So we've been on a journey there of about 3 years, from sort of first grain of an idea through to issue 1 of the standards. It's very much issue 1, and you can after today download those standards. There's definitely things that we can improve in those, and we'd love to get you involved, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. So if you click on another slide for us, I'll just talk a bit about who's involved. So I guess you can see lots of logos from different companies there, and there's others beyond what's shown there that have been involved in this, and we've had some fantastic input and collaboration. We've done this so far without any specific funding. There's been some funding through the MCDDM activity, but broadly this has been through the hard work and contribution of all those different organisations you can see there, and there's a number of people in there that have done some real heavy lifting in the very early days. Katie Blake, who was at Nottingham University at the time, did a brilliant job of kind of bringing this all together. We've got sort of Trudy Coulthard at BAE Systems helped us with the skills standards. We've got people like David Torr on the line, who we'll talk a little bit later on, who did some great work. Andy Robertson at JLR so I could name lots and lots of other names, but it was really, really brilliant to get that input. And I think Mike mentioned earlier about collaboration. What's been really powerful out of this is I've found working with my counterparts in lots of different organisations, and it turns out we've all got very similar challenges, similar interests, and that's been super valuable. And there's already been a number of different sort of sharing activities that have grown out of this that have certainly added value to those involved. So if we click on another one for us, Caroline, and just talk a little bit about the structure of the skills standards. So the first thing to kind of be clear on is these standards aren't training courses. These are standards that define what people need to be able to do metrology, and you can then use that to help develop training and things like that. So it's split into essentially 3 main sections. NMSA 1, the core standard, covers all the kind of fundamental metrology skills, and David will show in a little while what those look like and how that's structured. NMSA 1 also defines a set of skill levels, so it goes from a foundational skill level, so what would somebody who's not involved in metrology but needs to be aware of it, maybe a design engineer or somebody who's not conducting measurements but is using metrology data, they might need a foundational level of skill in metrology to do what they're doing. Through to then level 1 is all around people who are kind of conducting metrology tasks in accordance with an instruction. So typically maybe somebody doing an inspection activity would probably come in at level 1. Level 3 at the other end would be maybe somebody approving a measurement process, developing a new measurement technology, and then getting that approved for use in ANGA. And then level 2 sort of sits in between the two, and that's more a kind of sort of team leader type level. And we've designed those levels to line up with things like chartered engineer levels. So things like level 3 is similar to the kind of level that you would expect for a chartered engineer. So level 1 covers those core skills NMSA 1 covers the core skills and also the competence levels. And then NMSA 2 can then be configured for a particular industry. So we've got standards that are available now for manufacturing that covers a lot of the kind of mainstream dimensional metrology in kind of production environments for sort of physical products. That's all covered, so that covers things like coordinate measurement machines and the like, and again David will take us through that. We've got Gordon Fish with us and a number of members of our flow working group. So they've defined skills standards for flow metrology, and we've got others that we're looking at doing it around force and control, and we want over time to bolt on lots of other ones. So you can imagine maybe electrical measurement, or we've talked about mass and things like that. We can then add those into that NMSA 2. And then finally, NMSA 3 is then the kind of qualification processes that we're planning against those skills standards. The idea there is that will provide a way for individuals to demonstrate that they're competent against NMSA 1 and 2, and do that in a kind of an open industry standard manner. So David will show us what those things look like in detail a little later on. If we just click on one more for us, I'll just talk a little bit about sort of where we're going and where things are now. So obviously we're here now, we're publishing this to the wider world. We're fully expecting to have some early life improvements. We've got version 1 out there, but already there's 2 or 3 things I'd like to sort of improve that I've spotted. We'd really love to kind of get feedback from yourselves on here and wider world on what we can do to further improve that standard. And also we'd like people who are interested in, if you've got an area of metrology that you think is really important to define, to pin the skills down, similar as to what we've done with manufacturing and flow, then come and talk to us, and we can start thinking about how we start to build a library of those NMSA 2 standards. We're then looking at, on the bottom of the timeline there, looking at the NMSA 3, the qualification process. Steph, do you want to sort of say a few words about what our thoughts are there and where that's going?
Yeah, so our plan for NMSA 3, like we said, we've designed the standard to be very similar in structure and approach as UK spec and the specification that the Science Council also uses. So the plan is to create a qualification around the similar line. So this is a competency framework. So we're not requiring anyone to do a set amount of training or specific training or take any exams with anybody or spend any money on this that you don't need to spend. And we also want to limit the required qualifications that you would need to have for this recognition, because again, not everybody comes through into metrology in the same way. So we're looking at turning this into a competency-based application against the standard. So you need to demonstrate to us that you have achieved the competencies laid out in the standard, but how you achieve those competencies and at what speed and using what method is going to be entirely up to you as an individual, which should give everybody the freedom to sort of build their application around their own career.
Brilliant, thanks, Steph. And we're expecting a little later this year to have the sort of first version of that process developed, and then to test that and publish it, as you can see there on the timeline. And I think that becomes really important, because I'd love to be in a position to put a job advert out for a metrologist and say, I want an NMSA 3 level 3 metrologist, and there's an industry recognized way of being a level 3 metrologist, and we can do that today in non-destructive evaluation. I can't do that in metrology, and so this becomes really powerful over time, as it becomes as it sort of permeates across industry. You can see there on the top right some longer term things. So we're looking at one of the things I'd love to have, certainly from my perspective in Rolls-Royce, is a suite of open source training solutions, particularly against the foundation levels that are really quite generic, And so how we can kind of get some of those things in place against the standards, I think would be really powerful. And we've been looking at various routes and funding options to get some of that developed. Longer term, and international standards clearly where we would want to be, and there's a few different routes to doing that. Again, we'd love people to kind of come and join us on that journey and where we're going. And then certainly longer term, Steph's mentioned the kind of alignment to things like UK spec. We longer term really love to see something like a chartered metrologist or incorporated metrologist, and that's sort of hopefully where we're heading after this. So that's a sort of very quick tour of sort of where we've come from and where we're going, and we'll dig a little bit deeper. Steph, is there anything you sort of want to add to that before we hand over to Alan?
No, I think we've covered. I've seen a really good question from David in the chat already, but I'm going to leave it to the panel because I don't want to take us off down a tangent. But I've seen it, David, and I will answer it in the panel discussion.
Excellent, thanks, Steph, and yeah, for everybody else, if you can drop questions, thoughts, whatever, into the chat and into the Q&A. We've got time at the end of the agenda to take all of that, and we're going to have a panel discussion around all those things. So without further ado, I think I'll hand over to Alan at AWE. Alan.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Alan Oliphant. I'm a Senior Quality Manager at AWE, responsible for running the Metrology Development team. I was involved in the initial setting up of NMSA when I worked at NPL, and actually I'm fortunate to have been able to transfer my involvement across to my new role in AWE. So this afternoon I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of how I've taken advantage of the fact that I've been involved in developing this standard, and how I propose we roll this out within AWE. And it's a kind of model just of how companies can then adopt NMSA, how they can apply it within their organisation, and how we can take that forward. Next slide, please, Caroline. So I've decided to pilot it in dimensional metrology functions. There are other functions that probably would benefit from similar approach. So, for example, radiography, where we can apply, particularly on the X-ray CT side, some of the things that we're applying here. But my team actually acts as the pinnacle of dimensional metrology within the organisation, and we have sister functions that support manufacturing inspection. And I've taken an approach where we should have a common approach to the way we deal with that. And I've then started to develop things, and I'm planning to roll them out, not just within my team, but with the blessing of the senior management across the manufacturing inspection teams as well. So we have a common and consistent approach. So AWE is a manufacturing company, so we've taken an approach for both the NMSA 1, the core fundamental skills, but also we've looked at where we can apply the manufacturing metrology side of it too, just to make sure where we go through from there. I've mapped the requirements across all the functional roles that we have. So there's 6 within the metrology development team. There are 4 within manufacturing inspection, and the coverage I've put in takes us from people leaving their apprenticeships and then going up to department managers like me, to where we go from that. In AWE, we were hoping to use a tool called Kamea to run that and manage that. So Kamea is basically a very, very complex and competent skills matrix package. AWE being AWE, there's been a recent change, so the work I've done hasn't been lost. However, I'm going to need to repeat it a little bit when we start to roll that out in the company-wide approach. Next slide, please. So the first thing I want to make absolutely clear is I'm not doing this in isolation. I don't sit there and just say, right, you will be this. So what we've done is we've integrated it into our upcoming performance review process, where we will then start to say, right, okay, whereabouts are you to the people who are involved in this? What stage do you think you're at? And that's an objective discussion with their line manager, just to say, well, actually, have an agreement, concur where they are, but also then go, okay, well, what do you need to do for your job? And that then starts to come into long-term and short-term development actions, so that people actually have the confidence and the capability to then go and perform their job to the required standard. And we know that people get stale, people forget what they're supposed to be doing sometimes, and it's a constant battle to maintain those standards, particularly when you're in a highly regulated industry. So we need actually to defend ourselves and to start to make sure that we have those people with recognised skills and certification behind it to then support ourselves when the regulators come in and say, well, actually, you know, where we're audited, what's that person, are they capable of doing the job? Here's the evidence. And we will formalise those as personal objectives. So, for example, if we require somebody to be of a certain level of certification, the obligation is then on the business to say, right, we will fund that. We will make sure you have time to go and do the necessary training and examinations, and we'll go through those. And it's all written into that personal objective. And then those objectives are agreed between the individuals and the managers. And what we would like to do then is just say, right, here's a constant discussion through the year. So not just midterm and end of year reviews, but constant discussion to say, how are you getting on? What help do you need? Where do we go from there? Next slide, please. So just as an illustration of what was set up in CAMEA, it's easiest to then directly mimic the competency framework within NMSA. So that is looking at what role requires what particular functional levels, so there needs to be foundation through to level 3, but also what actually each one of those means. So what you can see on the screen, on the screenshot, is basically on the left hand side is all the individual descriptors for both the core competencies and all of those in NMSA level 2.1, which is the manufacturing metrology. And against each role, I've mapped whether that person or whether a typical person within that role needs to be at foundation level or all the way through up to level 3. So you're getting the 3 typical roles. One is as an inspector. The middle one is a senior inspector or like a supervisor, and the one on the right hand side is an experienced and what we'd call a metrology engineer, someone who should be operating at chartered engineer level. Behind that, I've actually copied and pasted, which I'm probably still suffering from RSI, with all the definitions across so that from NMSA, so that you've actually got a full model. And when we hopefully roll this out to a much wider audience, there is all the detail they need to then understand what each one of those levels stands for and why all those particular skills are in there. Those job profiles are then structured and mapped in line with NMSA. And what we then do is we then look at an individual against those job profile descriptions. Now, metrology is not the only part of those roles, but it forms a huge part. And that's the point where we're going, is that we're actually making sure that there's a very clear set of definitions for them to work towards, and a very clear set of objectives for them to achieve within their role. What happens next then, quite often, is that people then build that into their career paths. And there are some certain change points and markers put in there where we say, okay, if you want to go from, for example, a level 1 role to a level 2 role, you need to achieve these qualifications. And whether that's a small internal qualification, because we have that set up internally, or an external qualification, those are clearly defined change points and clearly defined against the role profiles that we have described. Next question, next slide, please. Finally, where we go next? Well, it's started now because we're in the new year for our performance management. So I've got meetings scheduled with my team just to go through that and to assess where they are with them. Looking further forward.
Alan was almost finished. I think what we'll probably do is move on to the next section, and we'll give Alan an opportunity just to sort of finish off towards the end if you can get back with us, okay. So yeah, I think let's hand over to David, and hopefully the IT gremlins will keep away.
Fingers crossed. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Torr. I'm head of metrology at Reliance Precision Limited, an SME just in the north of England. I've been working with the NMSA group for quite some time. I actually took on the co-chair of the manufacturing metrology section with James Mansell, who's been pivotal for that group as well, and a lot of other members within the group that have all all supplied information and time, which is the big key to it. So today I'm going to show you a little bit about what's available. I feel like I should be able to cut a ribbon or something like that, but I've got no virtual ribbon to cut, so I will show you some pictures. And then I'm going to explain a little bit about what's inside the documents. I won't go into a massive amount of detail. I'm going to show you how to get them. And then I'm also going to show you how you can get involved, because that would be lovely. So we're releasing 4 documents today. I think Steph's put a link into the chat. So the 4 documents.
I'll add it again at the end so people can find it.
Yeah, perfect. That's fine. So the 4 documents are shown in front of you now. So we've got the core standard that you've heard Phil talk about. A subsidiary to that is a core standard guidance. The detail within the core standard is quite technical, as you can imagine. It's a metrology role. So there's some nice guidance in there that gives you guidance around somebody who's wanting to become qualified. It might be somebody who's assessing someone to just see what are they actually supposed to be doing under each of the competencies. So it might be in the future that we create that for some of the manufacturing and the flow, but right now we've just done that for the core. So then NMSA 2.1 and 2.2 are manufacturing metrology and flow metrology. So they are standalone documents, follow the same format as the core standard, but are used for sort of sector-specific requirements over and above the core requirements. So there's quite a lot of detail in them, and this is the first draft, as Phil said. We're not too proud to say that it will evolve over time, and we will be having some input. We will have missed things that we need to introduce. So we are looking for people to use this feedback and also help us with version 1.1. So if you could just move on, please. So inside the standards, I've just taken a couple of snippets out of each one of them here. The documents are quite large, so I didn't want to go through them live and flick through and probably give everyone some form of headache. So I've just taken a snippet out of the core standard and one out of the manufacturing metrology. So in the core standard, there is a section about measurement systems analysis, and in there are some descriptions and some categories. They are the individual competencies we expect people to be able to do at the different levels, as Phil explained earlier. There's quite a lot of detail in there. This is to give guidance to the budding metrologist or even the person assessing within their organisation around what we're expecting people to do at the different levels and actually what they expect to do as part of their role. So what you will see then in the 2.1 on the right hand side of the screen is for the individual sector section, so the 2.1, the 2.2, there is actually a section about MSA in there as well. Because what you do in dimensional metrology and what you do in flow metrology might be slightly different, but follow the same principles of the core standard. So this is a bit more unique to the individual subject area you're working within. So I pulled two examples out of there for coordinate metrology, and one very close to my heart, and manual measurement, again, very close to me. And you can see there's some slight differences and variations between what we're expecting people to be able to do with them 2 different types of measurement. For the manual gauging, you've got attribute agreement, whereas you don't necessarily have that for coordinate metrology. So this is a little glimpse of inside the documents. Like I said, they are quite large. There is quite a lot to cover because the field of metrology is very large. So I don't want to kind of go through all that today, but please do use the download link and start going through the documents. Now on the next slide, I've been very, very stupid and put a video in. So I'm hoping this is going to work. And this just shows you, if you're not sure of how to use the internet, which I'm sure you all will be, of how you can get to the documents and look at this. Today I'm putting a lottery ticket on. So if you go to the InstMC website, if you go to the SIGs section, down to the Metrology Skills Alliance and the download standard, it will take you to the page with all the standards. If you click on them, they will download, and then you will see the entire document. So I do have a little bit of a skim through it here, just to show you there's a bit of a pretext that helps understand what the document contains and how you're supposed to use it. a bit more of an explanation of the qualification process that will come later. And then you will start to see all the different competency requirements for the core standard. And as you can see, they are quite detailed. So I do believe I go back again, and here we go, into the manufacturing metrology one. And this will just show you the document is very similar. There's a little bit more cut down. It tells you what's in and out of scope. And then the format is the same. So each of the sections follow a common theme to try and keep it simple. You've got things like surface texture in there, CT, and that's an overview of the document set. And obviously flow metrology there is very important, so is on there as well. So if you could just move on to the next slide, please. So the way we've been running this is obviously is a special interest group through the Institute of Measurement and Control. We are set up that each of the documents that you've seen there have their own working groups. So Phil is the chair of the core working group. Myself and James have been co-chairing the manufacturing, Gordon for the flow, and Caroline for the qualification. So we are still open to take people in and to help work on the evolution of these documents. We certainly in the manufacturing group, we got that much information put together that sometimes what you've written down you believe is absolutely perfect, and then you go and miss a section like GD&T and then come back and review it and think, oh, how did we do that? So sometimes you do get focused on the detail, and someone coming in from outside can just help us, help guide us to evolve these documents so that they really are very useful for everybody. So if you want to get involved, please do email the email address below there. Certainly, I'm happy for anyone to reach out to me on LinkedIn or whichever way to get a bit more information about how you might become involved, and if you can offer some expertise, that would be well welcome to the group. We are looking to do a version 1.1, and hopefully we get some great feedback off all the attendees here today that are using these documents and that help us build and grow this further and further. So I think that's all from me on that one. And I'm just so happy my video worked. So
spot on, David. Thank you. It's good.
So that's great. I think we can move on to the panel. Should we start with the question? Shall I introduce everyone on the panel and move to some questions? So we've got Phil Bamforth from Rolls-Royce. We've got Gordon Frisch from Swearflow Limited, James Mansell from Rolls-Royce Submarines, Alan Oliphant from AWE. We've got Dr Mike Percival from Rolls-Royce, Steph Smith from the Institute of Measurement and Control, and David Torr from Reliance Precision. We've got, I don't know whether you want to start with that first one from...
I will, Caroline, because also Alex has asked a very similar question.
Okay.
In how will existing metrology qualifications read across to the NMSA, which I think is very, very similar to the question we had earlier, which was, would there be a read across for existing qualifications? And the answer is, so we very much do not want to be prescriptive on what qualifications or training you have to meet the competencies. However, we are very, very open to the idea of looking at if a course is, somebody comes to us and says, I have a qualification in this, does that mean, you know, I've already met some of the competencies or the knowledge and skills in much the same way you would with Engineering Council if you had an accredited degree? Yes, we're really open to the idea of looking at that course content, saying, yes, you're right, it does meet those competencies, so we'll take that as proof of those competencies, and then keeping a list of those courses so that future applicants would also be able to come to us and say, I've got this course, this certificate, this degree, and we go, oh, brilliant, they're already on our list of courses that we've checked over, so we already know you've met competencies 1 to 12, so just provide us with some evidence that you've met, you know, 13 to 15. So yes, we haven't got that structure in place yet because again, with metrology, there's so many different qualifications. It's all very piecemeal. But as soon as we start developing that qualification, yes, we are very, very happy and very open to having a list of recognised qualifications that you can tick off. But we will never make those qualifications a requirement of achieving any of the levels. So you don't have to do them. If you've already got them, brilliant. It'd be a really easy, quick way for you to tick off a load of competencies really quickly. But if you haven't got them, it would never be a bar to you getting any of the levels if you could provide evidence some other way.
Yeah, I think that's really good, Steph. And just to sort of add to that a little bit, I mean, I'm sure people will be sort of familiar with things like there's National Physical Laboratory metrology training. In the manufacturing world, we've got things like AWE and CMSC and things like that. So we've very much kind of pitched the levels with that principle in mind, as Steph's described. So sort of an outcome program of training would be brilliant evidence to say, yeah, I'm demonstrating the competencies at level 3. But a lot of that details to kind of come as we develop the NMSA 3 sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think going back to our early discussions when we were sat down in a room, one of the things we said, we didn't want to have to exclude anyone from this qualification. You know, somebody who's had 20 years worth of hands-on measurement experience may not want to go to university or may not want to go and do a course, and it's giving them an opportunity to be able to demonstrate their skills through an application that shows actually this person is working to a very high standard and can receive a qualification.
So I think to me, Phil, and others, it's important to recognise the difference between a competence and a certificate. And this is about competence, isn't it? It's about demonstrating through evidence of training, experience, and practice in the workplace that you're operating at a level. And the definitions are showing those things. They're not saying, have you done X? They're saying, can you show that you can do Y? And I think we need to make sure that we recognise that distinction.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And there's a kind of a related question around that in the chat from William Kerr around looking at NDT accreditation and some of the kind of challenges with taking a very rigid approach to demonstrating competence. So if those not familiar, NDT has quite a lot of very significant training costs, exams that you have to sit. It's extremely prescriptive, and that makes it quite complicated for an organisation to demonstrate that their individuals are competent. I was actually, I spent some time with my NDT colleagues in the very early days of this, getting some advice, and they very clearly warned me away from kind of driving this to being very prescriptive. And that flexible approach that Steph described, I think, is really fundamental to show, so that people can show competence in lots of different ways.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that has that approach of competencies, however you've assessed them and gained them, should also hopefully address your question, William, that, you know, it shouldn't lead to prohibitive training costs, because we're never going to say you have to do this specific training. You know, we might work with a training provider who says, I've developed some training against your standard, will you check it? And we might check it and add it to the list of, this covers a lot of the competencies, but we'll never say you have to do this course. And again, I think that the sort of stuff you're alluding to there about pay increases, etc. Again, we're not planning to comment on that. That this has been an industry-led standard, and its application in industry is going to be led by industry. So we're never going to comment. We're never going to come in like some of the international organisations like Engineers Australia or Hong Kong Engineers and say all level 3 metrologists are going to have to be paid this level of salary. That's just not the level of sort of oversight we're looking to have. So hopefully, you know, it's going to be led by industry, and you should be protected by the fact that we're never going to specify a specific training that you need to have.
Okay, do you want to have the next question, Caroline?
Yeah, I think there's one from Joseph Dodd. I think we haven't answered. are we going to somehow link this to NADCAP measurement and inspection requirements?
Probably I'll take that one. I was very heavily involved in NADCAP measurement and inspection. It was my fault many years ago. I think Joseph, that would be the desire. I'm planning to attend the NADCAP meeting in June. It's in London this year. For those that are not familiar, NADCAP is essentially the aerospace and defence industry audit programme for a number of subjects like heat treatment and welding and the like, and measurement and inspection is also part of NADCAP. One of the things NADCAP asks for today is how does an organisation demonstrate that the people doing measurement are competent. Clearly, NMSA is going to be a great way of doing that. So I think the answer is yes, Joseph, to your question. I think when we do that and how we do that clearly is going to need to work through that NADCAP group.
Perfect. I think I missed David Fisher's question, which is there a flexibility within the manufacturing NMSA standard for candidates that may not have access to certain measurement technologies, say CT scanning, which may not be a discipline that can be picked up by all?
Yes, I think is the short answer.
Yeah,
but,
short answer, yeah.
Yeah, in the qualification process, we're looking at how we're going to be able to differentiate what technologies people use within the certain standards. So we're not saying a level 3 has to have a level 3 in CTE because they may not be using it. They may only ever be using manual gauging. So having the qualification process work around what that person's actually physically doing as a job will be key.
Yeah, and that's one of the big challenges for us for NMSA 3. So we've tried to cover everything in the standard that a metrologist might do, but we're aware that no one working in metrology is going to have done everything across every single one of the standards, and especially when we get to those sector specific ones, the manufacturing, the flow, it's not realistic that you would have done everything inside one of those. So really it will lead back to the core standard for the core underpinning competencies, the knowledge and skills. And those additional standards are to help people working in those specific fields. But we're not saying you have to do all of them. So yes, 100% as we develop the qualification, there will be clear guidelines on what you have to have done, say, a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B, you have to have achieved this many. But it will never make it so that, if you've never had access to CT scanning, you can't ever be a level 3, because that's not the point. This isn't a qualification on your technical skills and the amount of technical skills and different approaches that you know. This is about the underpinning competency. So that's always what we'll be coming back to and what we'll be assessing against.
Awesome. So I think there's another interesting question from Andreas here. How do you prevent double standardization or double definitions and the I can't say that word, ambiguities, or that work shall be put into a creation of standards that has already been done elsewhere?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one that we've not come across many areas where there's already standards defined. We've had some good discussion actually recently with a couple of the team involved in the VDA 5 standards in Germany, and we believe there might be a little bit of skills definition in there. But and there's other things, as I mentioned earlier, like CMSC, that are very specific to kind of a very narrow discipline in coordinate metrology, for example. But I guess part of the answer to your question, Andreas, is we really want to get other people who may be interested in developing skill standards or already doing this to kind of come and join with us. I really don't want this to be a protective kind of just NMSA club. This is about kind of really right back to what Mike said at the very start in his keynote around collaboration. And so my vision for this is absolutely an ISO standard or similar internationally recognized standard that defines this. And to get there, we'll need to bring in a much broader group than we've had so far. We've intentionally kept this relatively small initially to try and make some quick progress, because obviously the timescales for developing and publishing international standards can be quite long. But really today is the sort of firing the starting gun on starting to broaden the NMSA group to manage those kind of any risk of double definitions and multiple standards all trying to do the same thing. So yeah, really, if you've got something specific in mind, Andreas, I'd really love to understand more about that and sort of see where your thoughts are at there.
Yeah, I think we've said from the beginning this is a collaborative project. So if it's for industry, it needs to be led by industry. If it's for academia, it needs to be, led by academia. So we've had everyone involved, and that was part of the reason why the NMSA came and sat as a special interest group under the Institute of Measurement and Control. We're a charity, so we operate on a not-for-profit basis, and we're not here trying to write a standard because we want to use it to make our millions, because that's not what we do. We're a professional engineering institute, we're a learned body. This is the sort of stuff we are supposed to do for the benefit of people working in measurement and control. That's what we're here for. So that as well gives it a bit of protection that this really is a collaborative thing that anybody's welcome to come and get involved with, help us write version 2, add another section. So we're hoping as well that will sort of prevent that doubling up of work, because we're not holding on to it, we're not keeping anyone out. There's no gatekeeping going on here.
Thanks, Steph. I think there's one from Hugh. I think presuming that there are other colleges from different universities here, he would like to ask how academics like us, Coventry University, could be further involved, and if government funding could be introduced as a part of the support for NMSA further development.
Hi, Hori. Yes, we would love to have more academics and universities involved. So I think if there's anyone on the call that is interested in contributing to the standard or the qualifications, get in touch, please, and come and join one of the discussions and one of the working groups. And we'd love to talk to you about it some more. And yes, in terms of government funding, we would love that, I think, because then there's lots more things and plans that we can do faster and quicker and better. It's just a case of finding the right call for applications, and then having the time and the skills to sort of put in an application. So again, anyone on the call who's got a bit of a background or knowledge in funding applications, we'd love to talk to you some more.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mentioned earlier about the kind of foundation training solutions. So, for example, I recently in Rolls-Royce had to pay to get some foundational metrology training developed. So this is not really for metrologists. This is for sort of new entrants to the company, any engineer who needs to know a little bit about metrology. I had to pay to get that created. It's really generic material, but we couldn't find that in a form on the open market that was kind of out there. And really, it's at such a basic level. It kind of really shouldn't be commercial. I'd love to have that sort of stuff as open source, and then that becomes an entry point to then commercial training solutions that are funded. So if we can get some government funding to produce that library of open source, really basic training things, I think that has huge value for any organisation involved in measurement. There's some really great stuff out there already, but it's kind of pulling all that together to a library of things, hopefully aligned to the NMSA. So as well as hopefully useful within the education programs that universities deliver themselves. I think probably most people on the call would love to see more metrology in engineering degrees and science degrees. Providing a suite of resources on the shelf available for universities and education institutes to do that would be brilliant.
Thanks. There's one that's just come in from William. Who will be the arbiter of what qualifies as a competency? Will this be an internal interpretation of the standard with NMSA auditing, for example?
Yes, basically we're looking at applying it in the same way, again, that you would for UK, that the Professional Engineering Institutes do for Engineering Council for UK Spec for Chartered Engineers. So we will develop internally the set of sort of application forms and procedures, and as we said earlier, decide how many of the competencies you have to have. And then the current proposal that we're discussing is to do it again in a very similar way to an Engineering Council application. So it's a professional review done by peers. So there will be trained assessors who already hold the same level of qualification. So if you're going for a level 3, you'd be assessed by another or 2 other level 3s. And there will be guidance and training that we will organise and structure around how to assess the competencies. So that's like a little bit of the work we have to do, but that is how it works for an Engineering Council application. Engineering Council provides the list, the UK spec that's got the competencies in. We internally have trained professional assessors. So when someone applies, we go through their application and we go through their competencies and assess whether the evidence they've provided to explain why they meet that competency meets the standards that we have set. And then there's usually also, professional interview, a bit like a Viva, where that gets tested a bit. And we are planning a similar approach for this, because after a lot of discussion, it's the only way to do it without having to resort to expensive exams. So it will be a peer-reviewed assessment. At the end of the day, the institute will be the ultimate arbiter. They hold the standard, so they will organise and train the assessors to assess against the standard. But as with anything like this, there'll be a lot of documentation. There will also be a very robust appeal process. If you felt like that for some reason you had demonstrated a competency but somebody said you hadn't, we will have all the steps in place to deal with that.
We've got
to do a little bit more developing on that as we move through NMSA 3. So thoughts and feedback on that always very, very welcome, because we are aware we've kind of got to decide and legislate for all of these things as we move forward.
That moves on to that next question about how would it be developed, like how will these be developed plans be implemented, structured learning, training courses, self-directed learning, and any other means? How will it be assessed by the criteria set out?
All of the above. So it's the same with UK spec, which I'll keep going back to just because it's a really good example of how this works. You can develop, again, we refuse to be prescriptive, so you can develop those competencies however you like. As this grows, we will be able to implement not shortcuts, but as I said, we could do a list of qualifications that we've already checked and found cover the criteria. If a industry wanted to have their internal training checked by us to say it covers the competencies, that's also something we could do. Again, we do something similar for the Engineering Council. So basically, however you decide to structure your learning, whether that's influenced by your employer or just you personally, you will be able to work towards whatever qualification on the standard that you want. And it's just going to make our lives harder that we have to find a way to check off all of these different approaches. But that was one of the very core beliefs from the beginning, is that we wouldn't create something that excluded people.
Yeah, can I just add to that as well? As Alan's just demonstrated, what he's doing is taking this standard and actually merging it into his own internal competency and person development system. And I think certainly here at Reliance, that's what we plan to do. Why rewrite something that's already there? It pretty much covers what I need from my team, from the people that are working within the business, the hands-on measurement people. So use it, and then as they progress through their internal standards, then they're actually building up their application for becoming actually registered as they're working through the normal day life. So it shouldn't be that much more, really.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just looking at the Q&As that are coming in. Andreas has asked a little bit more detail in terms of in his experience, definitions are often discussed during the creation of the standard, and already recognised definitions are changed. So to what extent discussions have already taken place in the organisation, I think.
Yeah, it's probably just there's a couple of parts to that. It's a really good question, Andreas. We've aligned all of the language within the NMSA standards to the VIN, the vocabulary and metrology sort of standard that hopefully most people are pretty familiar with, and also referenced a number of different ISO standards that have definitions for things that we've used. So even like the definition of competence, that's kind of we've not invented our own way of doing that. Really trying to, as much as possible, build on the back of those things that exist, definitely not to redefine those things. The other thing in there as well is we've used something called Bloom's taxonomy, which some of you might be familiar with, and that's really a standardized structure for defining competence statements, and it has a standard vocabulary with that to define what somebody should be able to do. So between Bloom's taxonomy and the VIN, they're the kind of primary things that we've referenced in here. We might have missed something, and absolutely open to kind of building improvements in, but that's really hopefully answers your question there, Andreas. Just noting, Caroline, the sort of comments, it's not really a question from Sarah Kelly at BSI. Sarah's just sort of mentioning the product specification and verification group at BSI, so absolutely be in contact, Sarah. That's brilliant that you've shared that, because that's really exactly the kind of contact I was hoping we'd get out of today as an event. So awesome, thank you.
I haven't seen any other Q&As coming through, but please do, we've still got a few more minutes to put in any other questions. And
do send stuff through later via email.
Yeah.
We'll send around some notes from the meeting if we can, and we can share some emails, but also there's an inquiry form just on the InstMC website. So if you suddenly can't remember whose email to contact, just drop a note in there, and we'll make sure it gets to the right person, and we'll come back to you. So if you suddenly think of a question later, just drop us a message.
Nothing's coming in at the moment. So I'll just put this closing slide up. Just want to say thank you for attending. We're impressed by the level of engagement here, and there's some links to, we've already provided the links to the standard, which are available on the InstMC website. Please do get in touch with us. We hope many of you will get involved for the future of NMSA. Any other words from Phil or Steph?
No, just really from me. We have regular meetings for the whole NMSA group, and then the working groups as well. So we have that. So yeah, get in contact with us, and we can get you drawn into those conversations. So yeah, really hopefully people can start using it and giving us some feedback and getting involved.
Yes, please download it, use it, share it around, send it to everybody you know. It's public now, it's free. Go and get it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Okay, we'll close it there for today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everyone.